fellow Americans. My name is Thomas Paine. I was born in England in 1737. My father was a Quaker who made corset stays, and my mother was the daughter of a lawyer. I was in London in my mid-30s, where I met America's colonial agent for Pennsylvania, Benjamin Franklin. That's Franklin, not Franken. By the age of 37, I had failed at every enterprise attempted and was virtually penniless. Mr. Franklin encouraged me to immigrate to Philadelphia, where, with his letter of recommendation, I found work as an editor at the Pennsylvania magazine and wrote articles condemning British tyranny. Beginning in January 1776, at the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, I published Common Sense, then the American Crisis Papers, followed by The Rights of Man, The Age of Reason, and my last work, Agrarian Justice. While writing and politics are my passion, I'm also a civil engineer, having designed the Schuylkill River Bridge at Philadelphia and the Sunderland Bridge over the Ware River at Weymouth, England, receiving a British patent for a single-span iron bridge. My detestation of European monarchies contained in my writings earned me an arrest warrant from the English government in 1792. I fled to France to avoid extradition. In 1793, however, I was arrested as an enemy of France and sentenced to death. After spending 10 months in a French prison, James Monroe, the American minister to France, secured my release. I finally returned to America in 1802 aboard an American warship, courtesy of newly elected President Thomas Jefferson. And I've been on American soil for the subsequent 207 years, perhaps explaining my almost total loss of an English accent. I wish to share some of my words from around the time of America's independence, after which I will make a few comments concerning America's present condition. Some writers have so confounded society with government as to leave little or no distinction between them, whereas they are not only different, but have different origins. Society is produced by our wants, government by our wickedness. Society promotes our happiness positively by uniting our affections, and government negatively by restraining our vices. Society encourages intercourse, and government creates distinctions. Society is a patron, and government a punisher. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one. For when we suffer or are exposed to the same miseries by a government, which we might expect in a country without government, our calamity is heightened by reflecting that we furnish the means by which we suffer. Here then is the origin and rise of government, namely a mode rendered necessary by the inability of moral virtue to govern the world. Here, too, is the design and end of government, freedom and security. To unite the sinews of commerce and defense is sound policy. For when our strength and our riches play into each other's hands, we need fear no external enemy. Wherefore, security being the true design and end of government, it understandably follows that whatever form thereof appears most likely to ensure it, with the least expense and greatest benefit, is preferable to all others. But a government which cannot preserve the peace is no government at all, and in that case we pay our money for nothing. To elect and reject is the prerogative of a free people. Since the establishment of independence, no period has arrived that so decidedly proves the excellence of the representative system of government and its superiority over every other as the time we now live in. An appeal to elections decides better than an appeal to the sword. Agrarian justice. There are two kinds of property. First, natural property, or that which comes to us from the Creator, such as the earth, air, and water. Second, artificial or acquired property, the invention of men. In the latter, equality is impossible. For to distribute it equally, it would be necessary that all should have contributed in the same proportion, which can never be the case. It is always possible to go from the natural state to the civilized state, but it is rarely possible to go from the civilized to the natural state. The reason is that man in a natural state, subsisting by hunting, requires 10 times the quantity of land to range over to procure himself sustenance than would support him in a civilized state where the earth is cultivated. The thing, therefore, now to be done is to remedy the evils and preserve the benefits that have arisen to society by passing from the natural to that which is called the civilized state. Every proprietor, therefore, of cultivated land owes to the community a ground rent for the land which he owns, and it is from this ground rent that the fund proposed in this plan is to issue. The value of the natural inheritance in fair justice cannot be taken at less, nor ought to be taken for more than a tenth part. Agrarian justice being a plan for ameliorating the condition of man by creating a national fund to pay for every person when arrived at the age of 21 the sum of $24.31 to enable him or her to begin the world, and also $16.21 per annum during life to every person now living at the age of 50 years to enable them to live in old age without wretchedness and to go decently out of the world. Update to year 2009. My fellow citizens, what I was talking about in my paper, Agrarian Justice, was essentially a single federal inheritance tax of 10% to be used to pay for two specific federal entitlements, the equivalent of $304 at their time of entering the age of conscription, then 16 years, today 18 years old, and $203 per year beginning 10 years after the average lifespan, then 50, today 90 years old. But adjustment must be made for the difference in the value improvements of today versus improvement at the time of the Revolutionary War, when we had no hint of the Industrial Revolution, much less the technological revolution of recent decades. The value of the best cultivated acre then was on the order of 100 times less than now. So a more appropriate rendition of my agrarian justice plan would be the equivalent of $30,400 at age 18 and $20,300 starting at age 90. Finally, compare my vision of entitlements with the current taxation of these United States of America. We suffer in 2009 not a 10% inheritance tax, but a 45% one. We offer only loans to students discriminated against those who find themselves directly in the workplace at age 18. And we steal from future generations to fund entitlements that represent 13.5% of our gross domestic product. My advice to Americans today is twofold. First, re-elect no U.S. senator or congressman who votes to expand a single entitlement or who fails to enact federal tort reform to lower medical costs, or fails to permanently set the inheritance tax at 10% for 2010 and beyond. Secondly, secure pledges from your U.S. senators and representatives to pass a constitutional amendment to simply limit federal entitlements to the year 2000 level of 10% of GDP, gross domestic product. And if they won't sign the pledge, fire them on November 10, 2010 at the polls. Only you, the voting taxpayers, have the power to throttle the engine of socialism. Thank you very much for remaining attentive, and may God richly bless these United States of America.